Hi, I'm Julie, reading from Grimm's Fairy Tales, the original Grimm's Fairy Tales. Today's selection is Snowdrop. It bears some commonalities to what you and I might know of as Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs. A little commonality. I hope you enjoy the story. It is the original. It is not politically correct, but I'm going to read it anyway. I hope you enjoy it. Snowdrop. It was the middle of the winter when broad snowflakes of snow were falling around. The queen of a country many thousand miles off sat working at her window. The frame of the window was made of fine black ebony, and she sat looking out upon the snow. She pricked her finger, and 3 drops of blood fell upon it. She gazed thoughtfully upon the red drops that sprinkled on the white snow and said, "Would that my little daughter may be as white as that snow, and as red as that blood, and as black as the ebony of this window frame." And so the little girl really did grow up, her skin as white as the snow, her cheeks as rosy as the blood, and her hair as black as the ebony. And she was called Snowdrop. But this queen died, and the king soon married another wife, who then became a queen. This queen was very beautiful, but she was so vain she could not bear to think of anyone who could be more handsome than she was. This queen had a magical fairy looking-glass to which she used to go, and then she would gaze upon herself and say, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is fairest? Tell me who." And the glass always answered, "Thou, queen, thou art fairest in all the land." But Snowdrop grew more and more beautiful, and when she was only 7 years old, she was as bright as the day and fairer than the queen herself. Then the glass one day answered the queen when she went in to look as usual, "Thou, queen, art fair and beauteous to see, but Snowdrop is lovelier far than thee." When she heard this, she turned pale with rage and envy, and called one of her servants and said, "Take Snowdrop away into the wide wood, that I may never see her again." The servant led her away, but his heart melted when Snowdrop begged him to spare her life. And he said, "I will not hurt you, thou pretty child." So he left her by herself, and though he thought it most likely that the wild beast would tear her to pieces, he felt as if a great weight were taken off his heart when he made up his mind not to kill her, but to leave her there to her fate, with the chance that someone find her and save her. Then poor Snowdrop wandered along through the wood in great fear, but the wild beasts roared around her, but none did her any harm. In the evening she came to a cottage among the hills and went in to rest. Her little feet would carry her no further. In that little cottage it was spruce and neat. On the table it was spread with a white cloth, and there were 7 little plates and 7 little loaves, 7 little glasses with wine in them, 7 knives and forks laid in order, and on the walls stood 7 little beds. She was very hungry. She picked up a little piece of each loaf, and drank a little wine out of each glass, and after that she thought she would lie down and rest. So she tried all the little beds, Well, one was too long and another too short, till at last the 7th suited her, and there she laid herself down and went to sleep. By and by in came the masters of the cottage. Now they were 7 little dwarfs that lived among the mountains and dug and searched for gold. They lighted up their lamps and saw at once that all was not right. The first said, "Who has been sitting on my stool?" The second, "Who has been eating off my plate?" The third, "Who has been eating my bread?" The fourth, "Who has been meddling with my spoon?" The fifth, "Who has been handling my fork?" The sixth, "Who has been cutting with my knife?" The seventh, "Who has been drinking my wine?" Then the first looked around and said, "Who has been lying in my bed?" The rest came running to him, and everyone cried out that someone had been laying in their bed. But the 7th saw Snowdrop and called to his brethren to come and see her, and they cried out with wonder and astonishment. And they brought their lamps to look at her and said, "Oh, good heavens, what a lovely child she is!" They were glad to see her, and they took care not to wake her. And the 7th dwarf slept an hour, and each dwarfs took their turn, till the night was gone. In the morning Snowdrop told them all her story, and they pitied her, and said if she would keep things in order, and cook and wash and knit and spin for them, she might stay where she was, and they would take good care of her. Then they went out all day long to do their work, seeking for gold and silver in the mountains, and Snowdrop was left at home. They warned her and said, "The queen will soon find out where you are. Take care and let no one in." The queen, now that she thought Snowdrop was dead, believed that she must be the handsomest lady in the land. She went to her glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, tell me fairest, tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land, but over the hills in the greenwood shade, where the dwarfs their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the queen was very much frightened, for she knew that the glass always spoke the truth, and she was sure that the servant had betrayed her, and she could not bear to think that anyone lived who was more beautiful than she was. So she dressed herself up as an old peddler woman, and she went over the hills to the place where the dwarves dwelt. Then she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell, fine wares." Snowdrop looked out the window and said, "Good day, old woman. What have you to sell?" "Good wares, fine wares," she said, "laces and bobbins of all kind." "I will let you in, old lady. You seem to be a good sort." Snowdrop ran down and unbolted the door. "Bless me," said the old woman, "how badly your laces are, bless me," said the old woman, "how badly your stays are laced. Let me lace them up for you with fine new laces." Snowdrop did not dream of any mischief, and she stood before the old woman, but she set to work so nimbly, and she pulled the laces so tight that Snowdrop's breath was stopped, and she fell down as if she were dead. "There's an end to all thy beauty," said the spiteful queen, and she went away home. In the evening the 7 dwarfs came home, and I need not say how grieved they were to see their faithful Snowdrop stretched out upon the ground as if she were quite dead. However, they lifted her up, and when they found what ailed her, they cut the lace, and in a little time she began to breathe, and very soon she came to life again, and they said, "The old woman was the queen herself. Take care another time, and let no one in while we are gone." When the queen got home, she went straight to her glass and spoke to it as before. But to her great grief, it said, "Thou, queen, art the fairest in all this land. But over the hills in the greenwood shade, where the 7 dwarves their dwelling have made, there Snowdrop is hiding her head, and she is lovelier far, O queen, than thee." Then the blood ran cold in her heart with spite and malice. To see that Snowdrop still lived, she dressed herself up again, but in quite another dress from the one she wore before, and took with her a poisoned comb. When she reached the dwarf's cottage, she knocked at the door and cried, "Fine wares to sell." But Snowdrop said, "I dare not let anyone in." But the queen said, "Only look at my beautiful combs," and gave her the poisoned one. And it looked so pretty that she took it up and put it into her hair to try it. But the moment it touched her head, the poison was so powerful that she fell down senseless. But by good luck, the dwarfs came very early that evening, and when they saw Snowdrop lying on the ground, they thought what had happened and soon found that poisoned comb. And when they took it away, she got well, and she told them what had passed, and they warned her once again not to open the door to anyone. Meantime, the queen went home to her glass and shook with rage. When she read that very same answer as before, she said, "Snowdrop shall die if it cost me my life." So she went by herself into her chamber, and she got ready a poisoned apple. The outside looked very rosy and tempting, but whoever tasted it was sure to die. Then she dressed herself up as a peasant's wife and traveled over the hills to the dwarf's cottage. And traveled to that cottage, she knocked on the door, but Snowdrop put her head out the window and said, "I dare not let anyone in, for the dwarfs have told me, don't let anyone in." "Do as you please," said the old woman. "But at any rate, take this pretty apple. I will give it to you." "No," said Snowdrop, I dare not take it." "Oh, you silly girl," answered the other. "What are you afraid of? Do you think it's poisoned? Come, you eat part, I'll eat the other." Now, this apple was made so that one side was good, the other side was poisoned. Snowdrop was much tempted to taste, for the apple looked so nice, and when she saw the old woman eat, she could no longer wait. She had scarcely put that piece into her mouth, however, she fell down dead upon the ground. "This time, nothing will save thee," said the queen. And she went home to her glass. And it said at last, Thou, queen, art the fairest of them all. And then her wicked heart was glad, as happy as such a heart could be. When evening came, the dwarves had gone home. They found Snowdrop lying on the ground. No breath came from her lips. They were afraid that she was quite dead. They lifted her up. They combed her hair. They washed her face with wine and water. It was all in vain, for their beautiful girl seemed quite dead. They laid her upon her grave, and all 7 watched and bewailed for 3 whole days. When they thought they would bury her, her cheeks were still rosy, and her face looked just as it had when she was alive. So they said, "We can never bury her in the cold ground." They made a coffin of glass so that they might look at her, and they wrote upon it in golden letters what her name was, and that she was the king's daughter. And the coffin was set among the hills, and one of the dwarves always sat by it and watched. And the birds of the air came too, and bemoaned Snowdrop. And the first of the birds that came was an owl, and then a raven, and at last a dove, and sat by her side. And thus Snowdrop lay for a long, long time, and still only looked as though she were asleep, for she was even now as white as snow, as red as blood, as black as ebony. At last a prince came and called at the dwarf's house, and he saw Snowdrop. He read what was written in those golden letters. He offered the dwarves money and prayed and besought them to let him take her away, but they said, "We cannot part with her for all the gold in the world." At last, however, they had pity on him and gave him the coffin. But the moment he lifted it up to carry it home with him, the piece of apple fell from between her lips, and Snowdrop awoke and said, "Where am I?" And the prince said, "Thou art quite safe with me." And he told her all that had happened, and said, "I love you far better than all the world. So come with me to my father's palace, and should you be my wife?" Snowdrop consented and went home with the prince, and everything was got ready with great pomp and splendor for their wedding. To the feast was asked, among the rest, Snowdrop's old enemy, the queen. And as she was dressing herself in fine, rich clothes, she looked in the glass and said, "Tell me, glass, tell me true, of all the ladies in the land, who is the fairest? Tell me who." And the glass answered, "Thou, lady, art the loveliest here, I ween, but lovelier far is the new-made queen." When she heard this, she was started with rage. But her envy and curiosity were so great that she could not help setting out to see the bride. And when she got there and saw that it was no other than Snowdrop, who, as she thought, had been dead a great long while, she choked with rage and fell down and died. But Snowdrop and the prince lived and reigned happily over that land many, many years. And sometimes they went up into the mountains and paid a visit to the little dwarves who had been so kind to Snowdrop in her time of need. Snowdrop, Grimm's Fairy Tales, the original. I hope you enjoyed it. Have a good day. God bless, and we'll see you again. Bye-bye.